Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we are finally doing a PMDG 737 tutorial flight from Dallas-Fort Worth over to Colorado Springs. So stick around guys, because hopefully you'll find some really good information on this particular aircraft, as well as some updates to an upcoming tutorial guide. If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkills tutorial guides for Microsoft Flight Simulator, please consider joining me on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future updates and future guides that will be coming down the road. Link to Patreon can be found in the description below. Okay guys, so as I said, today will be a tutorial flight of the PMDG's Boeing 737-700. Real quick disclaimer, obviously information is still coming down my way. I'm still learning it, but I feel like I've got a good enough ground to deliver a tutorial for you guys. For those of you who have been interested in my PDF tutorial guide, we're about 80% complete. Again, there's still a bit more information I need to dial in, but it should be released over the next few days. I'm guessing about 3 or 4 more days, and I will have it available on Patreon. For anybody who's interested in supporting the channel or interested in acquiring any of my tutorial guides, please consider joining me on Patreon level tier 2 or above, and you'll have access to all of them. All right, so without any further delay and the anticipation of some mistakes I guarantee will be made, let's go ahead and jump into the cockpit and we'll get the show started. Okay, so we're just going to jump right into things here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to step up to the overhead panel. We're going to make sure the flight control switches are all guarded and covered, and we're going to step on down and turn our battery on. We're going to turn the emergency exit lights on. And then we are going to make sure the electric hydraulic pumps are off. GPU ground power is available, so we're going to go ahead and turn that on. Stepping down for a quick second here, you want to make sure all of your circuit breakers, both behind the co-pilot seat and the pilot seat, or first officer seat I should say, are all in. You also want to make sure, if we come back here, that the manual gear release door is closed and sealed. Normally you would come in and stomp on that with your foot, make sure it's down, but there's the manual gear release. If in the event for any reason the gear will not come down automatically using the gear lever, you could pull all 3 of those valves. It would drop the gears using gravitational force essentially. Just keep in mind that once you pull those, the gear can no longer be retracted. So we're just going to close that, give it a quick stomp. You'd also want to make sure that the emergency escape rope is also secured as well. Now, we're going to come down and we're going to make sure that our flap handle is in the full up position, and the flap gauges are also indicating up as well. We have 3 green on the landing gear. The landing gear handle is down. You also want to come upstairs and verify that you have 3 green in the rear overhead panel for the landing gear indicator too. The reason why there's 2 of them is in the event that you had, one of the light bulbs out, or for any reason the forward display was not functioning correctly, you have a backup indicator letting you know what the gear position is. From here, we'll step on down into the fire test. We're going to first test the fault and inoperable alerts. Looks good. The switch should automatically return to the center position, and then over here you're going to have the fire and overheat. Looks good. Verify the discharge on the APU extinguishers. 3 green is what we're looking for on both sides. Channels are good. And then do a cargo heat fire test as well. Excellent. All right. So next we're going to come upstairs to the overhead panel. We're going to go to the aft panel first. Do your flight recorder check. Set it in the test position. The off light should extinguish. Close the switch. Make sure the off light comes back on. Mach test 1. Mach overspeed test 2. Stall warning and shaker number 1. Now this should be giving you a rattle. I have had this, I don't know if this is a bug or not. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure what the connection there is yet. I think it's a bug. I think it's just something that's sometimes causing problems. Our IRS switches can move over to the nav position. Normally it takes about 8 minutes to complete an alignment. you can put your heading and status for your IRS display panel, set it to heading and status, and eventually you'll get a countdown and you'll get a display of when it is complete. So from here, we will go ahead and continue on with the rest of the pre-flight. Next thing we want to do is come here and do a lights test with this switch right here on the forward panel. And you're just making sure that anything that should be able to illuminate is able to illuminate. All lights are good. Step down, turn your light switch off, clear the master caution for now. It will absolutely populate again. Next, we're going to do an oxygen test. To complete the oxygen test, you're going to come over here to the oxygen panel here, and right above this white arrow, you're just going to push that, and you'll see the bubble Doppler here open up, indicating that oxygen is flowing. We are getting oxygen to the mask. Pre-flight and cabin checks are complete, so the next thing we're going to do is load the FMC. Now, real quick disclaimer here, guys. We are not using live weather, and the reason being is because I'm using all of the information from the tutorial guide. As I do with all of my guides, the PDF tutorial guides are not the only way to retrieve this information. Everything that is in the guide you are going to see in this video here today. So just keep that in mind, that's why we are not using live weather. Is because I want to make sure everything matches accordingly to what I have in my documentation. So the next thing that we're going to do at this point here is we're going to load in our passengers and fuel. Now, there's two ways to do this. You have the realistic way where you can actually call the fuel trucks, call the baggage carts, all that jazz. To save time for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to do everything on an instant basis, which means we're just going to load the aircraft up. And how we're going to do that is we're going to first clear the IRS, enter IRS position. We're going to go to FS actions, and we're going to come here to fuel and payload. So we're going to start with fuel. If I bring up our... Let me find my flight plan here and bring that up for you guys. Here we go. So first we're going to enter in our block fuel. 15207 is the pound of fuel that we're looking to get on board today. So we're going to type in 15207. And like I said, this is instant. So boom, the aircraft is now fueled. Go to return, go to our payload here. All right, and then now going back to our SimBrief flight plan. We're going to come down to the payload, and we have passengers of 119 and cargo of 6.5 thousand pounds. So let's go ahead and bring that down. Actually, total cargo and passengers, is 6.5 plus the 27.4. Actually, no, that should be total payload. Yeah. Okay. So I'm probably having that wrong. It's been a long week. But anyway, so at this point, we're going to set our cargo at approximately 3.2 is what I'm going to put. Again, it doesn't... Oops. Sorry. From here, you have to put 3,200. That's what we're going to do here. And rinse and repeat for the aft cargo. There we go. All right. And that's just how I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to worry about the correct cargo weights, although we do need to set our passengers. So we're going to do 119 passengers. We're doing single class. There we go. So passengers are on board, cargo's on board, fuel's on board. So now we're ready to continue with the rest of our startup checklist. So we're going to return to the main menu. Now we're going to move to the FMC portion and start programming the FMC. Nav data out of date. We'll take care of that at a later time. Don't worry about it. It still matches for what I need for us to complete today's flight. We don't have any concerns there. But here we do have our AirAct data. You can see it did expire as of the 22nd of April. Or actually, that's May. Expired yesterday. That's why. So I do need to update that, but not a big deal. Here I have a model of the aircraft, the engine rating. And from here, we're just going to go over to the position initialization page. Now you can see the set IRS position. This is us telling the FMC where the aircraft is. So what we can do here is we're going to go to the next page. And we always grab GPS left. I'm not sure why left. It must be the more accurate of the two, but we're just going to grab that. Go to the previous page and lock it in. You do not need to put in the reference airport or gate. You can if you choose. It is not required at this particular time. So now we're going to go over to the route page, and this is where we definitely need to type in our current location. So we are at KDFW, and we are heading over to Colorado Springs, Colorado. Flight number, we are Southwest Airlines 2772, fictional. And we don't need company route. We don't need the runway at this time either. Okay. So from here, we can go to the next page, and you can see that our VIA and 2 are completely blank. That is because we first need to enter in our departures and arrivals. So we're going to go to the departures. And here today, we are departing from runway 17 right. And we are using the, just passed it, Logan 8 SID, or Standard Instrument Departure. And we're using the rolls transition. Now I will show you guys where all that lines up now. So once again, departing from KDFW here, runway 17 right, using the Logan 8 and the rolls transition. So there's everything that you would see. And then next we're going to be entering the J52 airway to label. I hope I said that right. And we're going direct to Lamar, and then from Lamar jumping onto the Aussie 5 star. Now we are not going to be using runway 31, and I will explain why later. Okay, so the rolls transition. Now we can go to route, and there it is, Logan 8 to rolls waypoint, and then from here we're jumping on to the Juliet 52 airway, and we are going over to label. I hope I'm saying that right again. I absolutely butcher most of these waypoints when I read them. And we're going direct to Lamar. Now Lamar is going to give us a little bit of a surprise. All right, so for Lamar, there are 3 different locations within the FMC database with titles called Lamar. So from here, we need to determine which one. So we're going to go back to our flight plan, and we're going to find the flight log. And this is going to have a detailed list of all of our waypoints. So there's the flight log. You can see here's the Logan 8. We're actually on it. These are all the waypoints associated with the Logan 8. There's our top of climb. And we're looking for Lamar. There's, Liberal. My bad. Told you I butchered it. So we're going to Liberal. And then there is Lamar. And what we're looking for is this right here, the GPS coordinates. So 3881 north and 10241 on the west. So all we have to do is match that here. And there it is, 3811, 10241. So it's that top one. Lock that in there. And now we are ready to enter in our arrival. So now we're going to go to the arrivals page. And we're coming in on the Aussie 5, and we're going to be using the ILS 17 left. Now, let me show you why. So from here, let me pull up Navigraph. There's Navigraph charts. Let me get it up on my screen here and find the right star, Aussie 5. There we go. Okay, so now let me show that to you guys. Okay, so the reason being is if we come right here, you can see here the landing instructions. So if we're landing to the south, which we're going to be, we will be joining and executing the ILS runway 17 left approach. Okay, so if we were coming in from the north, we'd be using the ILS 35 left approach. And here is the direction that we're going to be coming in from. We're going to be coming in from the south. Here's our altitude restrictions, and then joining addon. And here you can see it again. Expect ILS 17 left or 17 right. But remember, SimBrief doesn't calculate for that information. SimBrief told us runway, I think it was 30. So that's why we are ignoring that. Always double check before you hit the generate flight plan button on SimBrief with your charts if you can what the correct runway is. That was something clearly I did not do. I will be correcting that for the images inside the guide. But let's go ahead and move on. All right, so coming back here, we know that Lamar is our transition point, and we know where we are transitioning to addon. So we need to select that as well. All right, and from here, we can now go back to the route page. Everything looks good. We don't have any gaps. We don't have any discontinuities. If you had a discontinuity, you would actually see a line right here with 5 or 4, however many blank white squares. That would be an indication that the FMS is missing something. So let's go ahead and hit activate and hit execute. Okay, and from here, once again, we'll go back to the legs page, and now we're just going to cycle through, and I'm looking for any flight plan discontinuities. And if I see one, that's when I would go up to the primary flight display and take a look at the flight plan and see what's missing. But everything here does look good. Here's a hold point if we need it. The hold isn't required, so we'll probably just go directly to the approach mode and jump on. This is the missed approach is what this is. You can see here we've passed runway 17 left at this point, so this is in the event that we have to call a missed approach. Okay, And we can take a look at that later on when it comes time to start looking at the descent and talking about our landing. But everything else looks absolutely fantastic. You can see we have a speed restriction at J.Girl for 240 knots, and we need to be above 5,000 feet. So not a big deal there. That's our only restriction. If we go back to Navigraph for a quick second, we can take a look at some of this. Okay, DFW. Open our book, and we're looking for the SID and the Logan 8. Where are you? There it is. And here we are here. So we're going to be coming out this way. So we're looking for any altitude restrictions. There's J-Girl, above 5,000 feet, maximum speed of 240 knots. Then we're going to be coming out this way and joining up at Logan. So that's our only restriction. Other than that, we can climb and we'll be free to navigate. This is over here on a different path. That's if we were taking out the other direction. So don't get confused when you guys are looking at some of this. Okay. All right. Let's close down Navigraph here. And we can now continue on with the rest of the FMC configuration. So let me pull up back up to our checklist here. Okay, so the route is now complete. We can now move on to our initialization page B. So going back to the initial reference, it automatically switches over to page 2. Now, first thing that we're going to do is enter in our cost index. Let's go to our sim brief, and we're going to talk about a few things here. Where's my flight plan? There it is. Okay. All right, sorry about that. I still have a cough going on, so occasionally I may have to cut the video and we'll bounce right back. But let's go back up to the top of our page here. Take a look at a few things. So we're going to have a cruise altitude of 36,000 feet. Our cost index actually is 32, excuse me. I thought it was 30. So glad I checked that. Those are going to be the big ones that we're going to need here. And then the final reserves. Final reserves that the FMC is looking for, where it says reserves, is actually looking for your final reserves and your alternate. So you can find that right here. So it's going to be 5,000 pounds. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and close down the flight plan. And we said cost index was 32. Drop that in there. We have 5.0 basically for our reserves. We can now calculate the zero fuel weight. There it is. Okay, perfect. Plan. You would only enter something in plan if the aircraft was currently still being fueled, but you would need to make sure that you remove that before you do your final calculations. Cruise altitude, we're going to 36,000 feet. Throw that in there. And we need our cruise wind. So let's go back to our flight plan, and we're going to go back to that flight log, and we're going to find the top of climb. There's our TOC right there, and we're looking at the wind. 271 for 41 knots is what we're looking for today. So let's drop that in. 271/41 knots. Drop that in. Okay, outside temperature is good. Transition altitude 18,000 feet in the United States. Everything here looks fantastic. We can go ahead and hit execute, and now go to the N1 limit. We're not going to be worrying about assumed outside air temperature for this particular video, so we're just going to go for Toga, which is the maximum power takeoff. So we're going to leave this right up at its 24K mark. So we will not be setting any of the D rates today. So which means we can move on over to takeoff. So takeoff, we're going to be using flaps 5 today. You'll pretty much always be using flaps 5. CG, go ahead and just tap that, calculate, drop it in. We have our trim of 6.19. So from here, I recommend going with a bit of a higher camera view, so you can see the gauge very, very well. And just hold your left click down and set our trim. And we're looking for 6.1. So just past the 6. Doesn't have to be right on the money. You just want it as close as you can. And this part does take a while, unfortunately. I've heard that holding shift accelerates it, but I didn't notice any difference. So right about there. I'm good with that. Boop. Okay, and then finally, we just need to set our V speeds in. So there's 134 knots, and we're just going to save ourselves a bit of time and drop that into the indicated airspeed marker right away. Now, you can still use the +5, +10 knots if that's something that you choose. Again, the idea behind that is it provides a better climb out. So we'll go ahead and use the +10. So that would be 144 knots. All right. And let's see where we're at on I believe that is the completion. That is. All right, so our FMC is now complete. Now we can continue with the rest of the aircraft setup and get ready for pushback. All right, so stepping upstairs at this point, you want to make sure all of your flight controls and spoiler controls, everything is closed and guarded. Yaw damper comes to on. Navigation switches should all be in the normal position. Display source as required. Fuel pumps. We are fueled, so we can go ahead and turn the fuel pumps on at this point. Coming up top, set your electric panel as you choose. We're going to switch that over to APU Gen as we're going to be starting the APU in just a minute. Galley power is on. Standby power is on. Disconnect switches are closed and covered. And moving our way down. Wipers are secured. They are not needed at this time either way. Circuit breaker and panel lights set as desired. Equipment cooling switches are on. Emergency exit lights are armed as well. Seatbelt signs. The aircraft is done being fueled, so we want to set that to on for the current time, as well as no smoking or portable devices. Press the attend button. Let the cabin know that we're getting ready to get on out of here so they can start prepping everything back there in the back. Alrighty. So, and then again, wipers, as I said, are in the park position on both sides. Coming up top here, we want to turn our window heats on. The probe heats can remain off for now. We'll turn them on as we get closer to takeoff time. Anti-ice, only if you're in icing conditions are they absolutely necessary. Electric pumps need to come on, or hydraulic pumps come on. And let's see, where are we here? Moving on down, you can do a cockpit voice recorder test if you choose. You just press this whole green button for about 5 seconds. Let's see the little green light that illuminates. And let's start moving up top. Set your environmental controls as desired for your passengers and personal comfort here. Packs at this point can go into the auto position. Isolation valve will remain in the open position as well. Recirculatory fan sets to auto. APU bleed remains off for the moment. Engine bleeds are on. We can set our cruise altitude to 36,000 feet. Oop, went too far. There we go. And landing elevation is going to be 6,200 feet. We'll set that and then I'll show you where I got it. So 6,200 feet. We'll step back over to Navigraph for a minute so I can show you guys where that information was acquired from. So we're going to come up here and we're going to go to Colorado Springs where we're landing at. We're going to find the approach, runway 17 left. And what you're looking for is right here, TDZE, touchdown zone elevation, 6187, rounding up to 6,200 feet. All right, so that's where we got that information. And let's see where we're at this point. Alrighty, we are looking good. Okay, so coming on down, you just want to make sure that your pressurization mode is also set to the auto position. At this point, we can now set our lights as desired. If you're doing night operations, you can turn your logo and wing lights on. We'll turn the wing lights on anyway, just because it looks cool. All right, and from here, we're going to come over and we're going to start the APU. So grab that, click it down to start. Paying attention to the APU exhaust temperature should go between 600 and 800 and then settle back down. As it starts coming back down, we will see the APU bus become available for use. It does take it a second. The low pressure, oil pressure indication is a good sign that the APU is starting. And there's the APU coming up. While the APU is getting all squared away, we'll move down to the mode control panel, or MCP, and we'll set a few things here. Initial altitude actually is going to be 10,000 feet today, so we'll go ahead and leave that as is. I'm going to set our runway heading. 17 right today is going to be 174 degrees, and I will show you guys in just a minute where we got that as well. That's going to require us to go back to Navigraph. Let's do that real quick. It's always good to keep your charts handy. This is why it's so awesome when they have it inside the aircraft and it works real smooth. So let's see here. We're going to go to our taxi information, airport info, zoom in. I'm sorry, it is 176. 17 right is our runway here, and 176 is the final heading. And this is why we always double check everything, right? So let's go ahead. Nope, went too far. There we go. 176. There we go. And you can set your initial headings after takeoff if you wish to your first VOR, your first legs, however you choose to do that. For today's flight, I'm just going to leave them as is. They don't need to be adjusted for what we're doing today. But we do have our 10,000 feet. Let's come back over here and let's see where we're at on our checklist here. It says stop altitude. We just did. Let's go ahead and turn our flight directors on at this point. All right, and from here, we'll step back upstairs. We should have the APU available. It is down and stable. You can see APU Gen is now on here. So we're just going to flip these two inner switches to switch the electrical bus over to the APU instead of the ground power. At which point we can come up top and turn the ground power off. And then we can step on down to the FMS, go to Menu, FS Actions, Ground Services, and Release. So ground power has now been released from the aircraft. The jetway's still there, so we'll step back down. Oh, looks like it's going to go away anyway. Yep, there it goes. So it pulls the jetway as well, which is really awesome, actually. Saves you a bit of time. Stepping back over to our central view here, we're going to set the auto brakes down to RTO. That's for rejected takeoff. It's in the event that we need to stop or abort the takeoff. And let's see what else we've got going on here. On the MFD, we're going to go to System, and you want to verify that your hydraulic pressure is good and within the limitations. As far as I'm aware, these numbers don't change. I don't know if it's modeled, but that is part of our process. So we'll go ahead and go back to the engine page at this point that we were set and ready for engine start. Parking brake, we want to make sure the parking brake is now set because we'll be removing the chocks here shortly. Speed brake, you want to make sure it's down. Flap handle, once again, still retracted, verifying 0 flaps are there. And let's back up here. Stabilizer trim switches, you want to make sure are in the normal position. Any nav aids that are required, VORs, etc., that would be used after takeoff, you would set those now as well. And we're going to set our transponder squawk code. So let's see here. We're just making something up as we go here. Boop. Sure. And let's do, I'm literally just spinning it till it finds numbers that works. 5577, that sounds great, but we do want to make sure the transponder moves to the standby position. You want to make sure your alt source and transponder are both set to the captain. So number 1 there. And then stepping back one more time, you also want to make sure all of your trim indicators are 0 and free. And all of guard switches are down and closed. All right, everything is looking very, very nice at this point. Let's see where we're at. All right, so our APU bus is on. The GPU is disconnected. Let's make sure our doors are closed. And that's this panel right here. If we had an entry door that was open, it would be illuminating. So we're good to go there, which means we are now ready to set our anti-collision lights to on and call our pushback. So from here, let's get the aircraft backed up. All right, we have pre-planned the pushback, so we're just going to go with request. And at this point now, let's switch our transponder over to alternator off, or altitude off, altitude off. So what that will do is basically we will now show up on ground control and the radar screen for ATC, but the aircraft isn't doing any altitude reporting. So they can now see us on their screen and see where we're at in the airport. We're going to step upstairs as we start preparing for engine start, and we're going to set our packs to off. APU bleed now comes to on. All right, let's release the parking brake.
Parking brakes are released. Commencing pushback. You can start the engines in sequence. It will start in the sequence.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the right engine. We're going to move it over to ground. Monitoring the engine RPM there, or N2 RPM, looking for 25. Once it gets to 25, we will engage our fuel. And there's 25%, and right engine to idle. All right, and once the engine start switch automatically moves back into the off position, we can now start the left engine. So switch that over to ground. And same thing, left engine monitoring for 25% of N2 rotation. There's 25. Engine to idle. I love this toolbar pushback. It's so cool. That's the add-on that I'm using for the pushback, guys. Toolbar pushback. You can pre-plan it. It's freaking awesome.
Okay, pushback completed. Please set your parking brake.
Parking brake set.
Parking brake set. Lowering aircraft.
Ground. Startup is complete. You may disconnect.
Roger. Good engine start. Clear to disconnect. See you at the side. Have a good flight.
Awesome.
Holding position waiting for the visual. Thank you and goodbye.
All right, beautiful stuff. So at this point, we now have 2 engines up and at idle. So we're going to step upstairs here. We're going to do a couple of different things now at this point. We're going to switch the electrical bus over to the generators. There's Gen 2. There's Gen 1. We're going to set the engines over to continuous. This continuous start keeps the engine running. And we can now shut the APU off. Turn off the APU bleed. Turn our packs back on. Probe heats will now come on. Anti-ice if necessary. I don't think that it's going to be necessary for today's flight based on how I have set the weather. Isolation valve remains in the auto position. Or actually, we'll just click that up one. There we go. We can set our flaps 5 for takeoff. So first is going to be flaps 1, flaps 2, flaps 5. 3 times. And you can see the flaps are now in transition. And you also get an indicator letting you know that the flaps are moving. Awesome. I love watching the control surfaces move. It's too much fun. All right, let's see where we're at. Stabilizer trim is set to 6.1 degrees as previously briefed. Fuel cutoff switches are in idle, or the engines would be off at this point. Control surfaces we have checked and verified. Rudders are working. Flight control surfaces are responding. And let's see here. Let's do a recall. Make sure we don't have any errors or alerts that pop up. We also want to clear the lower DU. We can just hit the system page twice, or either one of them twice. And the reason why you want this blank is if you get an alert or a warning or something, it will automatically display on this page. So if you know that it's blank and you look down, there's something there, that's a good indicator it's something that requires your attention. Okay? From here, we can also come upstairs and turn our taxi light on and runway turn-off lights if you choose. Oh, sorry, runway turn-off lights. Got ahead of myself. No runway turn-off lights yet. All right, and let's see here. Taxi lights are set. Parking brake is set. Takeoff config. So with the takeoff configuration check, what we're going to do is we're going to push the throttles above 50%. If we hear an alarm, it means that the aircraft is not in a takeoff configuration, meaning that we're probably missing a step. Could be flaps aren't set, something to that nature. So push them up. All right, so that's a perfect example. We got an alert. And honestly, it's probably the parking brake. So if we were to release the parking brake, there we go, no alert. So that's a good indicator, right? All right, so at this point, we're just going to go ahead and begin our taxi out. Now typically you can taxi between, on the ramp, about 15 knots, but I knew that we had some tight turns coming up, so keeping it slow. 15 knots on the ramp, 10 knots on any turns above 45 degrees or low or slower, I should say. And then once you're free and clear, about 25 knots. Like once you're on a taxiway, I should say, instead of free and clear. The rudder pedals are super sensitive on this aircraft, though, I will say. Alright. So I had to say goodnight to the kiddos. Who you can probably hear. One of them, I think, just fell down. Poor babies. They get so upset. Alright, whoa. Yeah, and I need to dial in my rudder pedals. My rudder pedals are super sensitive in this aircraft. Super sensitive. But at this point, I'll catch you guys in about 30 seconds here. Don't really have much else to talk about at the moment, so I'll see you guys in just a minute. Alright, so we're approaching our runway here. Now, normally you'd have someone here to help you with all this next part, so we're just going to stop the aircraft at the threshold and walk through it. Alright, so from here, we're going to step on down. We're going to set our transponder over to TARA. That's for traffic avoidance and resolution alert. It's our TCAS. You can see the TCAS enunciation that was on the PFD is now gone. Or the nav display, excuse me, not the PFD. And let's see what else we got to going on here. So we're going to come upstairs here and we're going to turn all of our lights on. So landing lights come on, runway turn off lights also turn on. And let's see here, position lights need to go to steady and strobe. So move those up into the top position there. Stepping on down here, auto throttle needs to go to the armed position. LNAV can also go to arm. If for any reason LNAV won't arm, it means you're in heading select, so keep that in mind. In this case, we're just going to go directly to the autopilot, and we are ready to take the runway. And you can also see the enunciation here, arm and LNAV, letting you know that it's ready to be used. It's not active yet. Whoa! Darn it, I really wish they'd fix that. So, the problem here is what you guys keep seeing me do is, if you move your camera while you're trying to, say, move the mouse, or move your rudders, you can't. And if you're using your rudder pedals and then try to adjust the camera, it interrupts your rudder pedals. And then so when you stop moving the camera, you get a sudden burst of input. It's really stupid how they did that. I don't know why they did it. Happened with one of the updates. I think it was like 7 or 6. It's really annoying. But anyways, okay, so we are good here. Now we are going to be using Toga, which means we're going to be going to max power. First thing we're going to do is spool the engines up to about 40%. Once they got 40%, we're stable, we're going to go into Toga. There's two different ways to do that. On the throttle, you can't really see them from this angle, but there it is right there. That little button right there is the Toga button. And that can be kind of a pain in the butt to hit. So one of the things that I always liked about PMDG, and I think the Zebo has it too, is they always put in a hidden Toga button. That screw right there on the MCP is the Toga button. So that's what we're going to be using. So we're just going to line up here as we are here, spool the engines up to 40%, make sure we're stable. Okay, good enough for me, and Toga. Airspeed alive.
80 knots.
Cross-checked.
V1.
Hands off the throttle.
Rotate.
Rotating. Whoa, there's a crosswind.
Positive rate of climb.
Gear up. Easy, baby. Come on. Man, a little bouncy. I'm scaring the crap out of all the passengers back there. Going to flaps 2. So we just need to be at flaps 1 by the time we reach the line. Come on, baby, climb up. Nose up, nose up. And at this point, it's totally up to you. I normally like to fly a little bit longer, but at this point, we can go VNav and Command. Command A, Autopilot's now engaged. It has the airplane. We're now approaching flaps 1. So we now are setting flaps 1. All right, and after takeoff checklist real quick, there's a couple things that we need to do real quick. We need to make sure the gear is in the off position at this point. Auto brakes need to go back to the off position. Engine start switches, if we move, flaps need to come up. We've reached the up point, flaps coming up. All this happens pretty quick. Engine start switches need to go to the off position. And verify pressurization is increasing. The inner needle here is the actual pressure inside the cabin, and I believe the outside needle is the difference. The actual altitude outside of the aircraft. But don't quote me on that. I might have those reversed now. Now I'm second guessing myself. I might have reversed those two on accident. All right, let's keep on moving on. We're going to increase our altitude clearance up to 24,000 feet. This thing climbs like a rocket. I love it. It flies, man. All right, so we're coming up on 10,000 feet. Stepping back upstairs, we can do a left click here, and it will automatically, if you click on the gang bar, just do a left click, it'll automatically pull all the landing lights back up. Runway turn-off lights come up, as well as the taxi light. We also want to do a fuel balance check, making sure that both tanks are still balanced. Everything looks good there. Seatbelt signs at this point, we're going to move them to the auto position. Same thing with the portable devices. Oh, I see, my bad. All the passengers back there, ding, ding, ding. Which is it? Do a quick recall, make sure we don't have any alerts or errors. We can return to the engine page here. And everything else, I think, is looking fantastic. Bye-bye, Texas. This is an awesome aircraft. I'm glad we finally have it. Okay, so we've passed through 18,000 feet, so now we need to hit the standard button. Switch the altitude back to standard. And from here, we're going to give ourselves clearance all the way up to our cruise altitude. All right, now as we pass through 30,000 feet, one of the things you do want to do here is you want to limit the bank angle. So we're going to set that down to 10 degrees. The reason we limit the bank angle when we hit 30,000 feet is you have to remember the air is significantly thinner. Okay, and obviously when an aircraft turns, any kind of aircraft that turns, the less airflow that is over the wing, therefore the less lift that's being generated. So when we get up to the high altitudes where the air is much thinner, we reduce the bank angle to prevent a wing stall, which would be really bad, especially in the passenger liner. That's a real quick way to get people to stop flying with you. So anyways, let's go ahead and continue on with the rest of the flight. We're going to go all the way up to 36,000 feet, our cruise level, and I will catch you guys when it is closer to time to talk about descent. All right, guys, so unfortunately I had an issue with one of my kids, and we passed the top of descent. It's TD. So at this point, what I'm going to do is immediately get the aircraft descending very quickly. So I'll show you guys why we're setting the altitude we're setting here in just a second, but let me get us going down. And we're going to do altitude intervention here, which will make the aircraft start descending immediately. Forgot to pause the screen, but so real quick, and I'm actually going to descend rather quickly to try to catch up here. This isn't how you would normally do it. So let me walk you guys through real quick how this would normally go. Normally you would see down here on the ND, you would see TC for top of climb, or top of descent, TD, excuse me. Okay, so you would see TD, and you would set your altitude to your target altitude. In our case, we're using 10,000 feet because that's the altitude of the initial fix for the approach. That's where I like to set that up. So if we go to Navigraph real quick, and I come over here to Colorado Springs, and I go to the book, and I go to our approaches, I go to 17 left. You can see here, Mogul is the initial fix for the approach, and our altitude requirement is 10,000 feet, and that's why I set that particular target in the MCP panel. You'd want to set that before you reach the top of descent. As long as you set your altitude before your top of descent, once you reach the top of descent, the aircraft will automatically begin to descend, and you won't have to do this panic correction that I just did. Again, unfortunately, I got pulled away from the simulator, so we are, well, we might still make it. We're about 4,000 feet above where we need to be. We need to be at 28,000 feet by Lamar, so I don't know if we're going to make our altitude restriction here. No, we're not. We're going to be a few thousand feet above, so we're going to maintain this for a minute. But if we go over back to Navigraph charts for a second, and we take a look at the star, I can show you guys how this should have gone. So here's our aircraft down here. Again, we should have been right at 28,000 feet. So by Tull, we need to be at 27,000 feet, which that we are going to make, it looks like. Once we get there, I will re-enable VNav and let the aircraft continue its descent on its own. So luckily, we caught it fast enough. We didn't miss it by too much. And you can see here the flight restriction. Oops. Get that off the screen. So you can see here, there's Tull. We're at 27,000 feet. We're just about there. So I'm going to go back into VNav up here. Let the aircraft control the descent rate. You can see the flight or altitude restriction here. So everything else is looking pretty good. Now, let's start talking about the rest of the descent checklist that we want to do. And we normally would have done this about 80 miles before our top of descent. That's really critical. You want to start planning about 80 to 100 miles before you reach the top of descent. So again, it would look like a green TD Tango Delta on your nav display. That's your top of descent point. That's when you want to have everything configured before you get there. So now let's get all the information that I wanted to have before. So with our weather information, we're going to want to take a look at that real quick here. Take a look at our wind speed. 162 at 9 knots is what we're going to be looking for. Okay, and then coming back to, I always forget how to get back to where I was. Close that. There we go. Temperature or altimeter, let's go ahead and set that to 29990. And temperature 59. Let's set that down Celsius here. Oh no, it's in Fahrenheit. My bad. So actually 6 degrees will work fine. You know what? Let's do this. Let's get the live weather and then we'll configure it as such here. So what I like to do is I go to Google and I do KCOS MEDAR information. Then I just click on one of the links that pops up, and right now temperature there is 1 degree Celsius. So it's down to about 3 degrees in Colorado Springs right now. So we'll go ahead and set that ish. We'll just leave about that 3. Altimeter is 3009. So I'm going to go ahead and set that ish. Come on. There we go. 3009. I don't like that it's changing here already, but that's fine because we're technically still in standard, so it should be registering standard, but that's all right. All right, so we're on the right descent. We got our weather set up according to live weather. Let's go ahead and dive into this now. So assuming we had not missed our top of descent. You would do this all 80 miles before the top of descent. That is important. Now, let's get into it. So first we're going to go to the descent page here, and we want to set up any restrictions that we may have. Let's see here. That I have a descent page 250 at 10,000. So we want 250, and we're going to change that to flight level 100, and we're going to throw that right there. Oh, wait. Oh, you know what? I think it's because we already started it. Dang it. I didn't want that. Damn. I want it though. I don't want to use a waypoint. Alright, well, it's giving us a speed restriction. 250 at Aussie, which is correct. So that's fine. Normally I would put the altitude in here, so if we had caught this before the top of descent, we would have put 250 at 10,000. So it's just the way that went. We can keep going here. We're going to go over to the forecast page. Hopefully we didn't miss everything here. So here's where we're going to set a bit more information. This would normally help us with our top of descent and making things a bit easier. Now we're already approaching 23,000 feet. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go over to our flight plan. And I promise the next video will be better. Hopefully I won't have any interruptions, but you guys know how it goes. Kids are kids. Family comes first. All right, so what I am going to set, what's our altitude here? I know you guys can't see it. I'm just checking. Currently we're at 23,000 feet. So we will set, for demonstration purposes, we're going to use 15,000 feet and 9,000 feet. And we're going to set the winds. 245 at 8 and 299 at 018. Now, normally you guys would be using live weather. So in our case, we're actually going to set our the winds that we have according to our live weather. So in this case, it's going to be go to wind layer 162 at 10 knots. So, but how we would do this is we would do 150 for the altitude, and then we're going to do 161 at 9 knots. Pop that in there, and we would do the same thing for 9,000. Oops. And it's going to be the same thing in our case because we're not using live weather. And you would put that in there. And where you would normally get that, like I said, oops. So there, I dropped it like this. There's the altitude that I put in. There's the wind speeds. And you put them in 161/9, just like you would anywhere else. And then here we're going to need the temperature, which is 1, or in this case, excuse me. Well, yeah, you want the minus the default. Okay, so it defaults at 15 degrees. Okay, so we need minus 14 because it's only 1 degree Celsius. So minus 14. And then the altimeter, which was, I already forgot what we had put in here. I don't normally use this, 3009. So 30-09 and drop that in there. And then TAI is if you have clouds on or off, you can set the top of the canopy to the bottom of the canopy for the clouds. At this point, we can go ahead and hit execute. All right. Next thing we want to do is we can set, so we've set our winds, our wind alert. This is just the idea behind this is to help with the descent, make it a little bit smoother. We've already set our VNAV target altitude to 10,000 feet. The aircraft will honor any restrictions on its way down. So we've got that part covered. And then let's see here. We're going to go down to the fixed page. This part gets pretty cool. So coming to the fixed page, we're going to put in our runway. So we are landing on runway 17 left. Put it exactly in this format. Drop that in there. And then we're going to put some alert rings. So we're going to do /5 for 5 miles. I like to do /10 for 10 miles. And then I also like to do /15 just as an extra alert. And what that does, it's going to make these a little hard to see. Let's see if I can get, there we go. It puts these rings on. So we know that when we pass through this ring here, we're going to be at 15 miles away, 10 miles away, 5 miles away. So when we cross the 10-mile ring, that's a good indicator that we need to make sure that we are preparing for to configure the aircraft for landing, right? And we're also approaching 18,000 feet, so we're going to be setting our transition altitude or our barometric pressure here in a minute. All right, and you would also want to make sure that in your legs page that you have configured your approach. Let's go ahead and set our altimeter pressure for a second here. So we're going to come out of standard. I'm going to hit the B key. There's the 3009. Now normally I would do that again about 10,000 feet, but we know since we hard set it in the simulator that that's just what it's going to be when we land the aircraft. So we won't have to worry about setting that again, but normally I would do it again at 10,000 and make sure we have the correct barometric pressure still. Okay, so in the legs page, you would want to make sure that you have all of your approach information set up. We also want to set up our ILS frequencies and missed approach frequencies. So let's go back into Navigraph for a minute. And we're going to go to the approach, 17 left. And we've got 2 that we need to look at. So for the missed approach, climb to 7,200 feet, then climbing, left turn to 9,000 on 020 heading, and outbound on the brake VOR at the 091 radial. So the Black Forest, excuse me, not brake. We want that VOR, and then we also want our ILS, 109.1. So let's go put those in. So first thing is we're going to come down to our nav radio. On the standby, I'm going to put 109.1. Switch that over to the active. So now we're tracking the ILS. And then we're going to set the missed approach frequency, which was 112.5. So there we go. In case we need to hit the missed approach, we just swap them over and we're good to go. And we'll be tracking the VOR. All right. Let's see where we're at now. Next, we also need to set our minimums. Now, the minimums for this, let's go back to Navigraph for a minute. Let's see here. Our minimums are right here. So 6387 on the Barrow, and we would use 200 feet if we were using a Cat 2 or Cat 3 ILS approach. Now, obviously, we have clear skies, full visibility, so we're not going to have to worry about that. Cat 1 will work. So we're going to be using the barometric pressure, which is 6387. Now, this is going to take for absolute ever to enter into the PFD, so I'm going to start it, and then I will come back to you guys when it's done. So, set to inches. Oh, over here. Excuse me, Barrow. And, oh, we need to go the other direction. And there's the Barrow populating right here. And we need to get that to 6387, so I'll catch you guys in a couple minutes. Okay, real quick, guys. So the aircraft has passed the decel point. You can see retard pops up on the primary flight display indicating that the throttles are coming back. The speed is now reducing, and auto throttle is back to the arm position. So now I'm going to continue setting our barometric pressure, which is taking forever. All right, so we finally got our barometric pressure in here for our minimums. So that's all set, and now we can get ready to continue the rest of our checklist. So let's see what we've done here. So we've entered in our minimum. We have our ILS frequency set. We have our missed VOR set. We have our final approach course that we still need to enter, which is going to be 174 degrees. Now, for right now, I'm just going to set it here. Actually, we can go ahead and set it and everything. We're getting close enough. But normally, you probably wouldn't set your final approach course in your heading bug until you were cleared by ATC, but we're not using ATC. So 174. Also, something else I forgot to do here. Below 30,000 feet, since we were in such a panic, we obviously want to set this back to 25 degrees. So there it is, 25 degrees of bank angle. Okay, all caught up. And this is the problem with panics like that. I should have just paused the simulator. I thought I would have enough time to help the kiddos out and come back, but that's all right. Hopefully you guys don't hold it against me. All the information's still there. You just do it much, much sooner. So everything that we just finally completed, everything that we did there, you would normally do about 80 to 100 miles away from your top of descent. Do not wait until you pass it like I just did, or you get in the panic that I just got into. Okay. So let's see how we're doing here. We have captured the glide path, so we're still on the correct descent path. That's looking great. We are... Now this is showing 15 nautical miles, but as you can see, we're not quite going to hit that ring because we're going to come way out over here and then come back in. So we still got quite a ways away yet before we have to worry about much else. But we can do a couple of different things just to catch up here. So first off, we're going to set our auto brakes to auto brake 3 for landing. We need to come down and set our landing configuration. So approach reference, yep. So we're going to come down here to the initial reference page. And here, what we want to do is actually go to the progress page. We're expected to have 8.1 thousand pounds of fuel on board by the time we reach our destination. Okay, but if we go, let's see here, If we go here, we can see, let's see here, that's going to be 7.8. That's actually, we're already, so we've already burned more fuel than what we were anticipating. Oh, sorry, never mind. Fuel quantity is 8.1. We're expected to have 7.7 when we land. So 0.4 away. So what I like to do here is we're going to go back to the initial reference, and we're just going to change this. So we need to subtract 0.4 from there, so that's going to be 121.6 as our gross weight. We're subtracting the fuel that we're expected to burn. We are going to be using flaps 30 on our configuration for landing. We can just double tap that and it puts it into the configuration. Approach speed is going to be 130 knots plus half of the wind component. We'll talk about that once we get a little bit closer, but 5 knots minimum. All right, and I think other than that, we are set and ready to go. Let's just do a quick check, make sure everything else is looking good. Flaps check, auto brakes 3, clear approach, QNH set. And again, you can tap the barometric pressure, but we already know it's right. But at 10,000 feet-ish, I would be checking it again to make sure that we're on point. Do a quick recall. All that is good. Step upstairs, verify the pressurization is set. Verify pressurization is changing as it should. Now, as we're getting ready to turn on final, we're going to do a few other things here. So we've got our frequencies in place. We've got our range rings in place. Let's see if we have identified the ILS. Doesn't look like we've captured the ILS yet. But we can go ahead and, arm the approach mode. We're within inside 20 miles-ish. And now, because I activated the approach mode, we are now capturing the ILS. Okay, you can see the glide slope indications here, or the localizer here, glide slope here. So that's great. Right on path, exactly what we're looking for. And it should actually capture. We'll see it lock up here in a minute once we turn on to the final. And it will probably start turning a little bit before we get to our final waypoint here. It'll probably start turning on to the final runway heading. And let's see what we got. So approach mode is armed. Let's go ahead and we're going to start taking control of the aircraft speed here at this point. So I'm going to go into speed intervention, and I'm going to start slowing us down to 200 knots. And again, the sake of this, in this case, is just to stay ahead so we don't run into the panic that I ran into last time while trying to talk through it. Also, a little bit ahead of time, but not too bad. We're also going to set our engines back into continuous, the engine start switches. I'm going to turn my lights on a little bit early. We're not too early, but we're a little bit early. I'm trying to get the crash bar down. There it goes. Or the gang bar. All right, everything else is still looking good. So we have lights on. Taxi light can go ahead and come on at this point. Seatbelt signs back to the on position for landing. And we can chime the attend button, letting the cabin crew know that we're getting ready to land the aircraft. All right, so landing lights are set. Retractable landing lights are set. At about 500 feet, we'll disengage the autopilot and auto throttle. I do recommend you guys bind those to something, but for today, we'll probably just push the buttons. There is a weird behavior when disabling the autopilot. When you use the button, you'll get the alert, right? If you bind that to a key, a keyboard command, the autopilot disengage, it tends to go away. I'm not sure why the button sounds the alarm, but if we do notice that, I'll show you guys what I do. I have bound my autopilot disengage to my Z key on the keyboard. All right, from this point, I'm going to set 7,200 feet on our box here. That's for the escape altitude. We're also going to start slowing the aircraft down to 180 knots. Flaps 1 coming in. Again, we're doing this all early for the sake of discussing it. Normally, I would start this process at about the 10-mile mark. Turning final. Single channel, indicating the glide slope has been acquired, as well as the, well, let's see here, localizer has been acquired. Waiting for the glide path to indicate green. There's our runway out ahead. So actually, I'm going to use the Z key on my keyboard to disengage the autopilot, but I will flip the switch for the auto throttle when it's time. All right, so we are now at 10 miles. So at this point here, I'm going to start aiming for our reference speed. Winds are 19 knots. So we are going to be doing 130 plus half of that, which is 8, give or take, or 9, give or take. So we're going to be going to 139 knots. Now it is letting us know that's a restriction. That's because we're traveling a little too slow, so I'm going to go flaps 2. I can't remember what the A stands for, but it basically means that we're trying to go too slow. So I'm going to go for flaps 5 and gear down. Again, all of this happening a little early. And that's for the sake of our tutorial. Continuing the flaps. There's flaps 25. And you can now see the glide path is locked in. And moving to flaps 30. So we are fully configured about 6 miles out, 7 miles out. So again, early. We're definitely early. But I recommend when you're starting to start out early. You can see we sort of missed, the aircraft missed the glide slope there. So now it's trying to descend to catch it. I always love those shots. The aircrafts look so cool when they're configured like that. All right, inside 5 miles. Getting close to the moment of truth. $700 feet, 650. Say about 500 feet. I'll disengage the autopilot. And you guys will get to laugh at how comical it is to watch me fly this thing. Alright, so first thing I'm going auto throttle off, then disengaging autopilot. Tapping that Z key again, and that's why we do that. Pass minimums. Continuing.
50, 30, 10.
Oh, my thrust reversers didn't arm. The other thing I don't know that I ever said, but you also want to make sure that you armed the speed brakes. I did arm the speed brakes, I just can't remember if I said it. All right. So thrust reversers luckily weren't required. We had plenty of runway. Let's exit the runway. And we want to completely clear the active. Better to take up a taxiway than a runway. All right, hold the aircraft still, and we will now clean up the aircraft. Okay, so now to clean up the aircraft, disengage the spoilers, turn off the auto brakes, clear the alerts, flight directors can come off. Get back to my checklist here. Make sure your weather radar is off, speed brakes are retracted, landing lights retracted, runway turn off lights turned off. We want to start the APU. Transponder needs to go back to Alt off. Position lights to steady. Remember, normally you have two of you doing this. And let's see here. Auto brakes off. Trim, you want to set to 5 degrees. Which I think we're actually pretty close to, it looks like. Oh, not really. There we go. Altitude, I like to set it all the way down to the bottom. Speed, down to 100 knots. And start switches to the off position. And probe heats can go into auto. All right. And at this point, we're ready to taxi to our gate. Oh, I got above 40% is why, or 50%. So we got the takeoff configuration warning, which is good. That's what we're expected to see or hear. Okay, so real quick while we're taxiing, a couple things that went bad. Really, it was just all about that top of descent. Okay, the rest of it, a couple things could have been better, but more of that's just practice and learning the aircraft. It really is. So, again, I just can't stress enough. 80 to 100 miles, make sure that you're planning for your top of descent. Okay, otherwise you wind up in the panic that I was in, trying to manage the descent, rapidly descend. Luckily, it looks like we didn't miss it by much. It looks like we barely missed the top of descent. And the reason why I say that is we caught our altitude path, our descent path pretty quickly. So that was good, because that could have gone a lot worse. Let's see here. What do we got going on over here? Looks like we need to make a right turn up here. Oh, and I forgot to clean up the flaps. So flaps coming up. I think I said it. I don't think I did it. You know, I think... Oh, you know what? I think I needed to turn left. That's all right. We're just going to go over here and park it. Yeah, I went to the wrong ramp. Well, no, because the other one, that's general aviation parking. So this has to be it. Jetways have to be over here. I'm looking at Navigraph, and it says the other ramp is GA, so... But the real big thing with these kind of aircraft is when you're learning, do things the way I did there as far as, whoa, nice. Gosh, some of these freaking maps, man. Anyway, goodness gracious, that was brutal. Give yourself lots of time when you're learning. Don't worry about hitting the numbers by the book. You know, get yourself all configured for landing really early. You know, no one's going to judge you. I'm certainly not going to be there to see it, and I wouldn't judge you. I have no right to judge anyone. You guys saw what I did. Dear Lord. Oh, you know what? Let's see here. Where? Yeah, the terminals are not over here. We passed the terminals. Son of a gun. Alright, well, we're just going to park over here. It is what it is. That's why we have stairs. That's what happens when you do this stuff late at night. And that's all that happened, guys. I apologize for some of these weird mistakes. At least they're nothing too critical. Just getting tired. Brain stops working. So, we'll park over at the cargo ramp. Alright, so normally at this point, before we make the turn, we're going to turn our taxi light off. That way we don't blind anybody who's marshalling us. And we're just going to park it right up here. We're going to pretend this is our jetway. And again, at this point, you'd want to make sure your weather radar was turned off before you turn the nose towards anybody, so you don't fry anybody's brain. And that's close enough for me. At this point, we'll hit the parking brake. Oops, I hit the pedal. There we go. Parking brake set. Move on up real quick. Switch over to the APU gen. And turn our engines off. Let the engines power down. Step upstairs. Make sure all lights are off and set accordingly. Position lights are steady. Anti-collision lights can now come off. Wing lights are off. Logo lights are off. Working our way up. Landing elevation and cruise altitude. You could set those down. Make things easier for the next flight. All right. And we won't need the APU bleed on, but we can turn the isolation valve open. Packs can now come off. Electric hydraulic pumps off. Window heats off. Working our way back up. Wipers are secure. Seatbelt signs can now come off. Same thing with portable devices. Equipment coolant remains on. At this point, we would normally establish ground power, but since we don't have it, at least I don't have it turned on at the moment. APU gen still set. Coming back up top. Fuel pumps at this point can come off. And yaw dampers off. We would switch over to ground power at this point, or completely secure the aircraft. So at this point, we'd go to off. Emergency lights secure, batteries off. Dead airplane. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you guys at least learned something. I know that there's still a lot of polishing I need to do. It's always really weird when you do a recording on an aircraft for the first time, especially one as detailed as the airliners. So I do hope that you guys enjoyed that. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one.